The sun had already set when Caroline finally got off work. Her feet were aching after hours on her feet, serving customers at the small coffee shop where she worked. She could still smell the coffee and freshly baked bread, but Caroline didn't care about that anymore. The tiredness weighed on her shoulders, and all she wanted was to get home, take a hot shower, and rest before facing another day like the last. She walked slowly to the bus stop, feeling the night wind touch her face. The city, always so busy, seemed a little calmer at this time of day. The streetlights illuminated the streets, reflecting on the asphalt wet from the rain that had fallen earlier. When the bus finally arrived, Caroline got on and swiped her card on the validator. The beeping sound indicated that she still had enough credit for that trip, a small relief amidst the bills piling up in her mind. She looked for an empty seat, and when she found one near the window, sank into it with a long sigh. The bus continued, on its way through the city's illuminated streets, and Caroline let her head rest against the cold glass. She looked at the tall buildings and the still open shops, feeling small in the midst of it all. Her life was a tiring routine, waking up early, studying in the morning, working in the afternoon, and returning home at night. The dreams she once had seemed increasingly distant. Will things change one day? She thought, feeling a tightness in her chest. She remembered when she was a child and told her mother that she wanted to be an architect. She loved drawing houses and buildings in her notebooks, imagining a future where she would have a comfortable and peaceful life. But reality had been harsh. There was never enough money for everything, and studying was already a huge challenge. Working was necessary to help out at home, and dreams were put off. Caroline sighed again, observing the other passengers. Some people were dozing, others stared at their cell phone screens. Everyone seemed caught up in their own worries, in their own exhausting routines. The bus came to an abrupt stop, and new passengers began to board. Among them, a young man with elegant clothes and a confident posture caught her attention. He seemed out of place there, as if this was not the type of transport she usually took. Caroline turned her eyes to the window, without imagining that this stranger was about to change her life forever. The bus stopped at a busy stop, and several people began to board. Among them was a young man who stood out completely from the other passengers. He wore a crisp white shirt, linen pants, and shoes that were clearly not made for walking on the city streets. His hair was neatly styled and a designer watch gleamed on his wrist. Caroline noticed that he seemed a little lost, as if he were out of his element. However, she didn't pay much attention until she heard the driver's voice rise. "Hey, kid, you need to pay the fare." The young man reached into his pocket and frowned. He rummaged in the other pocket, then checked his expensive leather wallet, but his expression quickly became tense. I forgot my wallet," he said, a little disconcerted. The driver huffed, crossing his arms. "No money, no ride. Next." The young man raised his hand in a calming gesture. "Please, I just need a ride downtown. I swear I can pay later." "It's always the same story," the driver replied impatiently. "If I let everyone ride for free, I would be bankrupt by now." A few people in the line began to complain, impatient with the delay. The young man looked around as if looking for someone who could help him, but no one seemed willing to intervene. Caroline watched the scene in silence. Something in the way he spoke showed that this was not just some random guy trying to scam him. He genuinely seemed surprised by his own situation, as if he had never experienced anything like this before. Before she could think better of it, Caroline sighed and fumbled in her purse. She took out some coins and stood up. "I'll pay his fare." The driver raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure, ma'am?" She nodded and handed over the money. The young man looked at her, surprised. "That's very kind of you, but I can pay you back as soon as—" "No need," Caroline interrupted, returning to her seat without paying much attention. The young man hesitated for a moment, then climbed up and sat on a bench next to her. He glanced at Caroline out of the corner of his eye, clearly intrigued. "Thank you again," he said, a little more quietly. Caroline just shrugged, unaware that this simple gesture of kindness would end up changing her life in a way she never imagined. The bus continued on its way, swaying gently through the city streets. Benjamin, still intrigued, glanced discreetly at Caroline. He wasn't used to this kind of situation. He had always lived in a world where money solved everything, where no one hesitated to help him because they knew who he was. But there, on that bus, he was just another passenger, and this unknown girl had extended her hand to him without expecting anything in return. "What's your name?" he asked, leaning forward a little. Caroline looked away from the window and stared at him for a moment before answering. "Caroline, Benjamin," he said, extending his hand. She hesitated for a moment, but ended up shaking his hand quickly before looking back at the street. "Do you always pay for tickets for strangers?" he asked, trying to make conversation. She let out a small sigh. "I don't often see well-dressed people trying to catch buses without money." "You looked like you were in real trouble." Benjamin laughed, shaking his head. "It's a long story." In fact, he knew exactly what had happened. For the first time in a long time, he had left home without the security of his team, his personal driver, or his unlimited credit card. He was trying to live a bit of real life, away from the luxurious salons of the Altamira family hotels, the largest hotel chain in Mexico. Since he was a child, his destiny had been set to take over the family empire. His father, a strict and business-obsessed man, always made a point of reminding him of his responsibilities. But Benjamin wanted more than just numbers and endless meetings. He wanted to know what it was like to live without privileges, without being treated as someone special just because of the last name he carried. But Caroline didn't know any of that. To her, Benjamin was just a young man who was a little lost, maybe a student or someone who was going through a difficult time. "So where are you going?" Caroline asked, without much curiosity, just to keep the conversation going. "The center," he answered vaguely. "And you?" "Home," she said simply. Benjamin realized that Caroline wasn't much of a talker, unlike the people who usually surrounded him, who were always trying to impress him or start conversations to get closer. "Mind if I sit here?" he asked, pointing to the bench next to her. Caroline shrugged. "Be my guest." He smiled and sat down next to her. The bus continued its journey through the city, and Benjamin felt, for the first time in a long time, that he was exactly where he wanted to be, without anyone knowing who he really was, without the weight of the Altamira inheritance defining his every step. But he knew that wouldn't last forever. That night, Benjamin couldn't get Caroline out of his head. Her simple, genuine kindness intrigued him. In the world where he grew up, favors were never free. Everything had a price or a hidden agenda. But this girl, a stranger who probably worked hard to pay her own bills, had helped him without hesitation. The next day, determined to understand more about who Caroline was, Benjamin looked her up. He didn't know her last name or where she lived, but he remembered the uniform she wore on the bus, an apron embroidered with the name of a coffee shop. He walked through the streets of the city center until he found the small establishment. It was a modest but welcoming place. Through the windows, a row of homemade pastries, freshly baked breads, and steaming cups of coffee were being served to customers. As he entered, a small bell hanging on the door rang, catching the attention of the employees. Caroline was behind the counter cleaning a table, and it took her a few seconds to recognize him. When she did, she frowned in surprise. "You?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Benjamin smiled. "Me." She studied him for a moment before continuing her work. "Don't tell me you came to pay my bus fare," he laughed, leaning his arms on the counter. "Not exactly, but since you brought it up, would you like a coffee as a thank you?" Caroline sighed, still suspicious. "If you want to order anything, sit down and I'll be right there." Benjamin could tell she wasn't the type to be easily impressed. In his social circle, people always wanted to please him, whether they were employees, friends of convenience, or even suitors interested in his fortune. But Caroline was different. He chose a table near the counter and watched as she served customers quickly. Even tired, she smiled sincerely at some regulars, exchanging few words with them. When she finally had a free moment, she approached his table. So what would you like? I think I'll trust your recommendation. She tilted her head, assessing him. Okay, a black coffee and a piece of cornbread. Simple and straightforward. Benjamin smiled. Sounds perfect. From that day on, he began to frequent the coffee shop regularly. At first, Caroline kept to herself, not giving him much of an opening. But over time, casual conversations began to emerge. Benjamin discovered that she studied at night and worked all day to help her family. Caroline, in turn, began to notice that there was something different about him. He didn't talk much about his personal life and avoided questions about his family. But small details intrigued her. His refined manner, the expensive watch he wore, and above all, the fact that he never complained about the price of anything, even when he ordered generously. Why did a man like him seem so interested in a simple coffee like that? This question wouldn't leave Caroline's mind. But for now, she just watched. And Benjamin, without realizing it, felt increasingly involved in that routine, in her presence and in the normality of that life he never had. The days passed, and Benjamin became a regular customer at the coffee shop. Every morning, there he was sitting at the same table near the counter, waiting patiently until Caroline had a free moment to exchange a few words with him. At first, she thought it was strange. A man like him, well-dressed and refined in appearance, seemed out of place in that simple environment. But little by little, she realized that Benjamin wasn't just there for the coffee. He wanted to talk. He wanted to get to know her. "Do you always come here alone?" Caroline asked one morning as she filled her cup with coffee. "I like the quietness of the place. And the service, of course." He smiled, winking at her. Caroline rolled her eyes, but smiled slightly. "That's what everyone says to get free coffee." He laughed. "I swear that's not the case, but if you want to try it, I can pay for a week in advance." The conversations became more and more natural. Benjamin showed a genuine interest in her life. He asked about her studies, her family, her dreams. Unlike other people, he seemed to really listen to her answers. "So, do you want to be an architect?" he asked one late afternoon, when the coffee shop was emptier. "Yes. I've always liked to draw houses. When I was a child, I used to build little cardboard houses for my dolls." Benjamin smiled, imagining the scene. "And now he wants to build a real one." Caroline nodded. "But it's hard. College is expensive, and I work almost all the time. I just do what I can." She spoke with a mixture of determination and tiredness that Benjamin had never seen before. For him, everything had always been easy. Studying, traveling, getting opportunities. Caroline's effort made him admire her even more. "And you?" she asked suddenly. "What's your dream?" The question caught him off guard. Benjamin was silent for a moment, playing with his spoon in his cup. "I don't know," he finally answered. "I guess I've never stopped to think about it." Caroline frowned. "That's weird. Everyone has a dream." He smiled, but there was something melancholy in his gaze. "Maybe I'm still trying to figure it out." Despite their growing connection, Caroline began to notice little things that didn't make sense. The way Benjamin talked about money, as if he never had to worry about it. The expensive watch he wore, despite his insistence that he was trying to live a simple life. His hands without any sign of hard work. There were still pieces missing from that story, and Caroline wanted to find out what he was hiding. As the days went by, Caroline began to notice small inconsistencies in Benjamin's behavior. As much as he tried to blend in with the simple routine of the coffee shop and the neighborhood, there was something that didn't quite fit. One morning, as she was cleaning tables, her eyes were drawn to Benjamin's wrist. He was wearing a fancy, sophisticated watch, the kind of piece only someone with a lot of money could afford. It didn't fit with the story he told about trying to live a simple life. "Nice watch," Caroline commented casually, setting the tray down on the counter. Benjamin glanced down at his wrist, as if he had forgotten about the accessory, and smiled. It was a gift. A gift from whom? He hesitated for a moment before answering. "A family friend. It was his, but he didn't use it anymore." Caroline raised an eyebrow. Something about the way he looked away made her suspicious. It wasn't just the watch. It was the way he talked about money, always in a carefree tone, as if he'd never had to count every penny. A week earlier, he'd mentioned that he could pay for a whole month's worth of coffee in advance, as if it were nothing. Another time, when a client commented on the high rent prices in the city, Benjamin had simply shrugged and said, "Money comes and goes. The important thing is to know how to enjoy life." Caroline, who struggled daily to pay her bills in college, tuition, knew that for most people, money wasn't something that just came and went. Besides, his clothes, although understated, were impeccably tailored, and even when he said he was tired, his hands never showed signs of hard work. There were no calluses, no cuts, no ink stains like hers, as she always wrote and made drafts for college. She began to wonder, who was Benjamin really? What was he hiding? That afternoon, while he was drinking coffee, Caroline decided to test something. If you could travel anywhere in the world right now without worrying about money, where would you go? He smiled, finding the question amusing. Italy. I like the culture, the food. I spent some time in Rome when I was younger. Caroline narrowed her eyes. When I was younger? What do you mean? Traveling with my family? Benjamin realized. He had said too much. He scratched the back of his neck, trying to think of a convincing answer. Yes, more or less. It was an exchange program. She smiled at the corner of her mouth, but didn't insist. She was sure he was lying. She just needed to find out why. With every conversation, with every detail, something inside her told her that Benjamin wasn't who he said he was. But it was by chance that the truth came to light, and when it did, it was a shock. One ordinary afternoon at the coffee shop, while cleaning a table near the window, Caroline overheard two customers chatting excitedly about a magazine article. Did you see this? The Altamira family has expanded its business to Europe. Their fortune is gigantic, and it seems that the heir has been causing trouble by refusing the family business. Caroline didn't pay much attention at first. After all, the world of the rich and famous was not part of her reality. But then, one of the women turned the magazine toward her, and her heart almost stopped. On the page was a photo of Benjamin at a gala event, dressed elegantly, holding a glass of champagne and surrounded by influential businessmen. The caption read, "Benjamin Altamira, the rebellious heir who challenges the family empire." Caroline felt her blood boil. He lied to me, she whispered to herself. For weeks, Benjamin had made her believe that he was just a young man trying to find his way. But in reality, he was the heir to one of the most luxurious hotel chains in Mexico. How could he hide something so big? She didn't want to wait to confront him. That night, when Benjamin showed up at the coffee shop, smiling as always, Caroline was blunt. "Why did you lie to me?" His smile disappeared. "What are you talking about?" Caroline crossed her arms. "Benjamin Altamira, heir to a billion-dollar fortune, owner of luxury hotels. Do you want to try to explain that to me now?" He was silent for a moment, as if searching for words. "Caroline, I can explain." She took a step back, feeling a tightness in her chest. "I trusted you. I believed everything you said. You made it seem like we were from the same world, but that was a lie, wasn't it?" Benjamin sighed, visibly frustrated. "I just wanted to be treated like a normal person without the weight of my last name. And for that, you thought it was okay to lie?" He tried to get closer, but she took another step back. "I don't know if I can trust you, Benjamin." Caroline grabbed her apron and went to the kitchen, leaving Benjamin standing there, not knowing what to do. He had never wanted to hurt her, but now he feared it was too late to fix everything. Benjamin stood there for a few moments, watching Caroline disappear through the door of the coffee shop's kitchen. His chest felt heavy. He knew the truth would come out eventually, but he didn't want it to be like this. The next day, he returned to the coffee shop, determined to talk to her. Caroline, however, avoided his gaze. When he tried to get closer, she simply said, "Benjamin, I'm busy." But he didn't give up. He waited until the end of the workday, and as soon as she left, he walked beside her. "Caroline, please listen to me," She stopped, crossed her arms, and sighed impatiently. What else do you have to tell me? Any other part of your life that you forgot to mention? He ran a hand through his hair nervously. I never wanted to deceive you. I just wanted to live without being treated like someone special because of my family's money. Caroline laughed, but without humor. And for that, you thought it was better to lie? Benjamin, I don't care about money, I care about the truth. He felt a tightness in his chest. From the moment you paid for my ticket on that bus, I saw something different in you. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't ask for anything. In return. In my world, people always have ulterior motives. I just wanted to get to know the real you, without my name influencing anything. Caroline's eyes were full of disappointment. And didn't you think I deserved to know the truth? I would have treated you the same way. Benjamin swallowed hard. I was afraid. Afraid that when you found out, you would push me away. She was silent for a moment, shaking her head. The irony is that it was precisely that lie that drove me away. Her words were like a punch in the stomach. Benjamin felt like he was about to lose her forever. Caroline, give me a chance to fix this. She took a deep breath, looking at him with a mix of hurt and affection. I need time, Benjamin. I need to understand if I can trust you again. Having said that, she turned and walked away, leaving Benjamin there, alone, with the feeling that his biggest mistake was not coming to that poor neighborhood, but hiding who he really was from the only person who mattered. The sun was already setting when Caroline showed up at the coffee shop the next day. Her eyes were red, as if she hadn't slept well, but something about her was determined. Benjamin, as usual, was sitting at a table near the window, leafing through a newspaper. When he saw her, his heart raced. He knew the confrontation was about to happen, but he didn't know how it would play out. Caroline approached slowly, her hands shaking but her expression firm. Benjamin, she said, her voice calmer than he expected. Can we talk? He looked up, his face etched with concern. Caroline, please let me explain. No. She interrupted, her voice grave. I've heard your explanations, but now I want to hear the truth. The whole truth, no more lies. She sat up, not waiting for permission. Her eyes were fixed on him, piercing as if she were trying to decipher every piece of him. I felt deceived, Benjamin. Everything you told me, all those conversations, every moment was based on a lie. I gave you the chance to be yourself, without rushing, without judgment. And you used that chance to hide the truth. Benjamin hung his head, guilt and regret overwhelming him. I never meant to hurt you, Caroline. I swear. I just didn't know how to be who I am and, at the same time, be who you wanted me to be. She stared at him more intensely. I never asked you to be someone else, Benjamin. I accepted you as you are. What I didn't accept was that you hid behind a role that wasn't yours. You made me believe in a version of you that didn't exist. And now, after everything, I don't know what to believe anymore. Benjamin took a deep breath, the anguish written all over his face. He knew that words wouldn't be enough to erase what he had done, but he had to try. I love you, Caroline. I know I didn't do things the right way, but what I feel for you is real. Every moment by your side, every smile, every conversation, it was the most real thing I've ever experienced. I didn't want my name or my past to interfere with that. I just wanted to be someone normal for you. Caroline smiled slightly, but it wasn't a smile of happiness. It was a sad smile, almost nostalgic. Benjamin, maybe I wanted you to be normal, but I didn't ask you to hide who you really are. That man, the heir to the Altamira fortune, he exists, he's part of who you are, and I can't pretend that doesn't matter. You have to understand, I don't feel like a lie, and I don't want to be treated like one. I deserve the truth. He felt the pain of her words like a sharp blade. But he couldn't give up on her. Not now. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Caroline. I just need you to know that everything I did was because I was trying to protect what we have. What I feel for you, that's more important than any money or any title I have. Please understand. Caroline was silent, her eyes fixed on his. There was a visible struggle inside her, a war of feelings. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe his words, but the pain of betrayal was still alive, pulsing through her veins. "I need time, Benjamin," she said finally, her voice softer now but still firm. "Time to decide how I feel, to understand if I can trust you again." Benjamin nodded slowly, knowing that words couldn't fix everything right away. He looked at her, anguish on his face, but also hope. "I'll wait, Caroline. As long as it takes." She stood up and gave him one last look. "I can't promise you anything, but I won't forget what you said." And with a heavy sigh, Caroline left the coffee shop, leaving Benjamin alone once again, with the weight of his lies and the hope that time would heal the wounds he had caused. The following days were like a silent storm in Benjamin's life. He couldn't escape the feeling that he had lost something very valuable. Every time he closed his eyes, he remembered Caroline's gaze, the sadness in her eyes, and the way she had confronted him. Guilt gnawed at his chest. But there was something else too. He felt that he needed to change, that his life could not go on like this. He no longer wanted to be the man living in the shadow of a fortune he never chose. It was one clear morning, as he watched the frenetic movement of the city from the top of his apartment, that he made the decision. He was tired of living as a prisoner of his inheritance, of his family's expectations. He had grown up in a world where every move was calculated, where every step was monitored. And now, in his mind, all he wanted was a simple life. A life where he could truly be himself. Benjamin picked up the phone, and with the same calm he had used to announce his achievements in the past, he called the family lawyer. "I want to renounce the inheritance." The words came out firmly, but Benjamin's heart was tight. "I want to walk away from everything my family has built. I want to choose my own path." On the other end of the line, the silence was almost deafening. The lawyer, a middle-aged man who had always been the voice of reason within the Altamira family, seemed at a loss for words. "Benjamin, are you sure about what you're saying? Giving up the inheritance? The family empire? That would change everything. Your parents would never accept it. I know what I'm doing." Benjamin's voice remained firm, but he could feel the weight of the decision like an iron weight on his shoulders. "I need to live a life that I can call my own. I no longer want to be an extension of something I didn't choose. I'm going to start the process, but understand that it may take some time. Your family won't accept this easily." The lawyer sounded resigned, as if he knew Benjamin's decision was beyond reason. "If that's what you want, I'll do what's necessary." Benjamin hung up the phone and leaned back in his chair. He knew his decision would change everything. His family would never understand him. They always saw him as the successor, the future of the Altamira hotel chain. But Benjamin was determined. He didn't want the luxury, the galas, or the business, dinners that had always marked his life. He wanted something different, something real. He packed his bags that same day, not with the idea of running away, but with the certainty that he needed to get away to find his purpose again. A week later, he was in Oaxaca, a quiet city in southern Mexico, known for its natural beauty and simple lifestyle. The warmth of the city and the tranquility of the streets welcomed him like a hug. He rented a small house, simple but full of charm. There, without the weight of family expectations, he felt like he could finally breathe. A few days passed before Benjamin ventured into the city. The place was different from anything he had known. There was no luxury, there was no rush, and this made him feel for the first time genuinely at peace. It was then that he realized that this was the place where he could start over without the shadows of the past. He started working in a small, local hotel. The work was hard, but the feeling of being needed, of building something with his own hands, made him feel freer. And little by little, memories of Caroline began to invade his thoughts, but in a gentler, less painful way. He knew he still had a lot to prove to her, but now in Oaxaca he was beginning to discover who he really was, but at the same time, he knew it wouldn't be easy. The Altamira family would never accept his decision. He was alone now, but for the first time, this loneliness didn't feel like a burden. It was, in a way, a new freedom. He had nothing left but his own choices, and that was more than he could ask for. That night, as he gazed at the starry sky of Oaxaca, Benjamin made a silent promise to himself. He would live simply, honestly, and do everything he could to regain Caroline's trust. Even if he had to start from scratch, he knew that this was the only way that would make his heart beat faster. Even after Caroline had distanced herself from Benjamin, the weight of doubt still consumed her. She wanted to believe his words. She wanted to trust that his feelings were real. But the lies, the omissions, the secret of his true identity, all of this still hammered at her mind. She didn't know what to do. Sometimes she found herself wondering if he really was looking for a simple life, or if deep down, he just wanted to escape the responsibilities his family had imposed on him. One afternoon, while she was working, at the coffee shop, the door opened and Carlos, a friend of Benjamin's, came in. Caroline recognized him immediately. Carlos had been one of Benjamin's few sincere friends, always by his side during college, and seemed to be one of the only people he truly cared about. Carlos approached Caroline with a friendly smile, but something in his eyes seemed different. He was more serious, more thoughtful. "Caroline," he began, his expression grave, "I need to talk to you about Benjamin." Caroline's heart skipped a beat. She had tried to avoid talking about him, but Carlos's presence made her realize that perhaps it was time to better understand what had really happened. "What happened, Carlos?" she asked, trying to remain calm, but feeling nervousness taking over her body. "Where is he? How is he?" Carlos pulled out a chair and sat across from her. His voice softened, as if he had something important to say, something he knew could change everything. "I know you're hurt, Caroline, and you have a right to be. Benjamin lied to you, hiding who he really was. But I need you to know something important." He paused, as if pondering the words that would come next. He tried to give up his inheritance before. He really tried to walk away from this empire, from that life of luxury and expectations. Caroline was silent, her gaze fixed on Carlos. She didn't know what to say, and the surprise left her speechless. "What?" she finally managed to ask, unable to fully understand what she had just heard. Carlos took a deep breath, as if the revelation was difficult for him too. Yes. He tried to get out of the game, to try to live a normal life, without the pressure from his family, but his father stopped him. He had to continue with his responsibilities, with the promises he made to his family. "I know this because I was there when he tried. I saw the look in his eyes, the desire for freedom, and I saw the frustration when he realized he couldn't escape." Caroline felt a mix of emotions. Part of her was still hurt by the lies, but another part now understood a little more about Benjamin. She had always known that he didn't seem comfortable with the life he led, but she hadn't known that he had tried something so radical to change everything. "So he really wanted to leave. He really tried?" Caroline asked. The doubt, her voice now transformed into a hint of curiosity and understanding. "Yes," Carlos answered, his tone sad. "He tried, but the weight of the inheritance, the family, the expectations, it was too much for him. He was forced to continue, and it ate away at him inside. He felt trapped, Caroline, and that wasn't easy for him. But even so, he never completely gave up on his dream of living simply. But why didn't he tell me this? Why did he hide everything from me?" Caroline asked, her heart tightening with the pain of the unrevealed truth. Carlos looked at her with an expression of empathy. "Because he's afraid, Caroline. He's afraid of being rejected, of being seen as weak. He thought that if you knew the truth, you wouldn't see him the same way. And he didn't want you to see him as a person full of privilege. He wanted you to love him for the person he was, and not for the fortune he carries on his back." Carlos's words shook Caroline. She felt the knot unraveling, but at the same time she felt even more confused. How could all of this be true? How could she accept that behind all the lies there was a person who, deep down, just wanted to be loved for who he really was? "I don't know what to do, Carlos," she said with a deep sigh. "I love him, but I don't know if I can get over this." Carlos looked at Caroline with understanding. I know it won't be easy, but he really has changed, Caroline. He made a difficult choice, a choice that he knew would come with great sacrifices, and he's trying. If you still have feelings for him, maybe it's time to give him a second chance, not for him, but for yourself, to understand what you really want. Caroline was silent, absorbing Carlos's words. He was right. Maybe it was time to set the record straight, to understand if the love between her and Benjamin still had a chance of being rebuilt. After all, she knew that, no matter how much she had been hurt, her feelings for him were still alive in her heart. I need to think about it, she finally answered, her voice softer. I need to understand if I can trust him again. Carlos smiled gently and stood up. I understand, Caroline. I just want you to know that no matter how difficult everything may seem, sometimes you have to take a step back in order to take 2 steps forward. The choice is yours. He walked away, leaving Caroline alone with her thoughts. She looked out the window, the sun beginning to set, reflecting golden light over the city, and for the first time in a long time, she felt that maybe it was possible to find a way forward. But to do so, she needed to believe. She needed to trust. And most of all, she needed to understand that even amidst the shadows of lies, love could still be the light that would guide them. The morning sun shone softly over the small town of Oaxaca, where the narrow streets were filled with the scent of fresh fruit, colorful flowers, and everyday life. Benjamin walked along the cobblestone sidewalks, now with a more serene expression, different from that impetuous and lost young man who once carried the weight of the Altamira family fortune. He was now immersed in a simple life, starting from scratch. And although the path was arduous, a sense of peace enveloped him with every step. Benjamin worked in a small hotel in the city center, a modest but charming guest house. The place was not luxurious. It did not have the pomp and extravagance of his family's hotels, but there was something about it that caught his attention, a sense of warmth, authenticity, and collective effort. "Good morning, Benjamin. How are you?" asked Mr. Rodolfo, the hotel owner, a middle-aged man with a welcoming smile. He was simple, honest, and despite his life without great wealth, he always seemed to be at peace with himself. Benjamin smiled, a little shyly, as if he was still getting used to the simple and straightforward routine of manual labor. "Good morning, Mr. Rodolfo. Everything is great. I'll clean the reception now, as agreed." He walked to the reception area and began sweeping the floor, focused, as if he were trying to reconnect with himself. The job was simple, but each movement seemed to have more meaning than anything he had done in the past few years, when he had lived in luxury and expected everything to be given to him without effort. As he swept the floor, Benjamin thought about everything he had left behind: his family, his friends, the businesses that had made him a millionaire. But now, here in Oaxaca, everything was different. Concerns about money and status seemed far away, and a new sense of purpose began to grow within him. He no longer wanted the life that money and power offered. He wanted to find satisfaction in the simple things, in the sweat of work, in the genuine smile of a satisfied guest. At lunchtime, he joined Rodolfo in the hotel kitchen, where home-cooked food was being prepared with such care. "Benjamin, life is more peaceful here, isn't it?" Rodolfo said as he cut some fresh tomatoes for the sauce. Benjamin looked at him thoughtfully. "Yes, it is. I never imagined it would be so different. Before I was surrounded by people, but I felt alone. Now, I see that there is something special in the little things, in the simple moments." Rodolfo smiled, putting the pot on the stove. "That's what life is made of, my friend. You don't need luxury or great fortunes to find happiness. Honest work and the value we give to the little things is what really makes the difference." Benjamin was silent for a moment, reflecting on the man's words. He was beginning to realize that, although he was far from the world of his family, he had found something more important: inner peace, something that, for so long, he had ignored. At the end of the day, as Benjamin cleaned the last table in the hotel, he looked at the horizon. The sky was tinged with orange and purple, reflecting the tranquility of the place. He sat down on a simple wooden chair and closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the cool afternoon breeze. It was at that moment that he realized he was truly beginning to live, no longer tied to an empire of riches and expectations, but free to build himself as a person. And although life was still far from perfect, he felt that he was finally on the right path. But deep down, something still bothered him. Despite having found peace, the memory of Caroline was still alive in his mind. He couldn't forget her, and he knew that somehow she was still part of his story. He felt that she deserved to know about his decision to change, to reinvent himself. Maybe at some point he could show her that his intentions were sincere, that he had truly changed. But for now, he knew that he needed to continue the journey. Benjamin's life was being rebuilt, and he was determined to move forward, with his feet on the ground and his eyes on the future. Caroline could no longer ignore what was in her heart. The decision was made, and the weight of doubt that had tormented her for weeks was now transformed into something clearer. She needed to find Benjamin. She needed to understand the truth behind his resignation and the feelings he claimed to have for her. She knew that her life had changed after that kiss, after the confrontation. And she also knew that, as much as the pain had hurt her, their story was not yet complete. After days and days of pondering, Caroline picked up her backpack, bought a bus ticket, and left for Oaxaca. The trip, which lasted a few hours, was like a metaphor for the internal process she herself was going through. It was a difficult path full of uncertainties, but she was willing to face it, even if it meant opening herself up to the unknown again. The bus rocked gently along the winding roads as she observed the landscape that stretched out around her. The thought of Benjamin accompanied her, and as the clear blue sky stretched out on the horizon, she couldn't help but wonder, what does he really feel for me? Has he really changed? Is the love he said he felt for me true, or was it just another lie he told? When she finally arrived in Oaxaca, the welcoming warmth of the city enveloped her, but also a certain nervousness that seemed to tighten her chest. She didn't know exactly where Benjamin was, but something inside her told her that she would find him. She searched all over the city center, asking in the shops, cafes, and markets, until finally someone directed her to the small hotel where he was working. That hotel, simple and modest, was not what she expected. There were no luxuries or great ostentation, but when she entered the lobby, Caroline felt a sense of welcome. There was something special about the environment, a genuine energy that seemed to reflect the change Benjamin had sought. She approached the reception desk and asked for his name. "Are you looking for Benjamin?" asked Mr. Rodolfo, the owner of the hotel, with a friendly smile on his face. "He's in the kitchen now, but I can tell him to come here." Caroline nodded, trying to remain calm. She didn't know what to expect, but her heart was beating fast, as if she was about to turn an important page in her life. A few minutes later, Benjamin appeared, with an expression of someone who couldn't believe what he was seeing. When his eyes met Caroline's, a silence took over the room. He seemed surprised, but at the same time, the pain he felt was also visible on his face. "Caroline, you came here." Her voice was low, almost a reverberation of an unspoken desire. She took a deep breath before speaking, her words coming out with more sincerity than ever. "I needed to understand. I needed to know why you did what you did. And most of all, I needed to know if what you felt for me was real. Benjamin, I couldn't move on without knowing the truth." Benjamin stared at her for a moment, as if weighing every word she had said. He knew this was his chance to finally be honest, to show her that her decision to change had not been in vain. He leaned closer and, his voice choked with emotion, spoke. "I knew that one day I would have to face you. I thought that maybe if I lived in Oaxaca, far from everything, I could leave the past behind. But I didn't know how to explain to you what really happened, Caroline. That world of luxury, was a prison for me. I was taught to follow a path that was not mine, to be someone I never wanted to be. When I met you, when I saw your kindness, I saw that there was something more to life, something that didn't involve wealth or status, but something deeper. I wanted to live with you, with the real you, without lies, without hiding. I just didn't know how to show you. Caroline listened intently, and when she looked into his eyes, she saw the sincerity. Something in her broke, and the pain she felt was replaced by a mix of conflicting feelings. She wanted to believe him, but the wounds from the past were still raw, and she didn't know if she should trust him again. But what about your family? What about the inheritance? Everything you left behind? Don't you regret any of it? She asked, her voice tense, trying to understand how he could give up all of that for a simple life. Benjamin looked at her, sadness in his eyes, but a strength of determination reflected in his gaze. I tried to give up before, Caroline, but my father stopped me. He wanted me to be who he imagined I should be, and I felt lost, not knowing who I was. When you came along, I saw an opportunity to be the man I always wanted to be, away from the expectations of everyone around me. Now, I'm willing to continue like that for myself, for us. Caroline felt the tension inside her begin to dissolve. Benjamin's truth touched her deeply. She didn't know what the future held for them, but one thing was certain. She could no longer run from what she felt. The pain had given way to understanding, and for the first time in a long time she felt renewed hope. I don't know what's going to happen now, Benjamin, she said, her eyes brimming with tears. But I'm willing to try. For us. Benjamin stepped forward without saying anything else, and gently pulled her into a tight embrace. They stood there, holding each other for a long moment, as if the world around them no longer existed, as if all the uncertainty and fear had finally disappeared. Caroline knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she also knew that with Benjamin by her side, she was ready to face it. And together, they could write a new story, one based on honesty, love, and the freedom to live the life they truly chose. Caroline and Benjamin, after so much adversity and distrust, finally found the peace they had been searching for. The time they spent together in Oaxaca strengthened them in a way that not even the most difficult challenges could shake. There, in that small village surrounded by mountains, they began to see a possible future. A future without the burden of lies, without the chains of the past, without the weight of an inheritance they did not want. The idea of opening a cafe and a small hotel came to them like a bolt of inspiration while they were walking through the streets of the city. The quiet streets, with their old facades and the welcoming energy of the residents, conveyed a sense of belonging, of something genuine. For Caroline, who had always known how to deal with the little things in life, and for Benjamin, who felt fulfilled simply by being able to build something of his own, this idea seemed like the only way to start over, far from the patterns of a life that no longer attracted them. I've always dreamed of having a place where people could feel at home, place that was mine, not in my name, Benjamin said as he looked at a vacant lot on Oaxaca's main street, a small plot surrounded by local trees and flowers. Caroline, her eyes shining, smiled as she imagined what they could create there, free from the shadows of the past. What if we did something simple but special? A cafe that is more than just coffee, but a place where people can share stories, laugh, and connect, Caroline suggested enthusiastically. The idea was clear. More than just a business, they wanted to create a space where the essence of simple and true life was present in every corner. The project took shape quickly. Caroline took care of the cafe side, choosing every detail from the wood that would form the counter to the aroma of the spices that would perfume the environment. She began to create homemade recipes based on the local culinary tradition, while Benjamin focused on the hotel side, which would have only a few rooms but very welcoming. He wanted the hotel to be something unique, where guests would feel as if they were staying at a friend's house, and not just another place to pass through. Together, they spent weeks renovating the place. It was exhausting, but there was something magical about the process. Every wall they painted, every table they set up, every chair they placed in the place seemed to be an expression of the new beginning they were creating for themselves. They didn't need luxuries. They didn't need great wealth or status to feel complete. They were building something that had value for themselves and for the people around them. Their friendship with the locals of Oaxaca grew stronger. Caroline and Benjamin were now seen as part of the community, and soon the first customers started showing up. The cafe, with its welcoming aroma, and the simple hotel, full of charm and good vibes, quickly became a success. The place had life, and this was reflected in every person who passed by. Conversations flowed naturally, and visitors not only felt welcome but also felt like they were part of something bigger. On a quiet afternoon, while serving coffee to a tourist who had come from far away, Caroline and Benjamin looked at each other with complicity, sharing a smile that said everything that didn't need to be said. They had achieved this together. They no longer needed the privileges of a world of wealth or the expectation of an inheritance that didn't define them. What mattered at that moment was what they had built with their own hands, and the peace they felt when they saw the result of their journey. "You know, Caroline," Benjamin said, as the two of them stepped back a little to observe the movement in the cafe, "maybe it was the longest thing, but it was all worth it. Look where we've come. The life we had wasn't real, but now it is, and I wouldn't trade it for anything." Caroline smiled, feeling the same satisfaction and happiness in her heart. She knew they were just beginning, that the path would be long and challenging, but she also knew that, with Benjamin by her side, she could face any obstacle. "I wouldn't trade it either, Benjamin, because now finally we're free, and our story is ours alone." As the sun set on the horizon, dyeing the sky orange and red, Caroline and Benjamin knew that their future would be built with love, hard work, and honesty. They had left behind what did not make them happy, and now, with the cafe and the hotel as a symbol of their new beginning, they were ready to move forward together, without fear, without lies, and above all, with the certainty that the future could be simple, but full of meaning. I am absolutely sure that this story touched you, so leave your like on this video, subscribe to our channel, and activate the notification bell. If you do this, you will always receive exciting stories like this.